Take a look at your smartphone. Chances are it's either an iPhone or it's running Android. Today, that choice seems completely normal, almost like a law of nature. But it wasn't always this way. Just decades ago, the mobile world was a wild, creative, and chaotic place. There were giants in the market, companies that seemed absolutely untouchable. Nokia's Symbian OS was on more phones than any other. BlackBerry was the undisputed king of business. Microsoft was, well, Microsoft. And everyone assumed they'd eventually dominate mobile too. So what happened? How did we go from a diverse battlefield of ideas to a two-party system? This isn't a simple story of one company out-innovating another. It was shaped by hubris, poor choices made in boardrooms, and of brilliant technology that was simply killed off. Let's look at how the world's top mobile OSs actually died. Before the iPhone changed everything in 2007, the smartphone landscape was ruled by two very different titans, Symbian and BlackBerry. First, you had Symbian, which was basically Nokia. In late 2010, even after the iPhone and Android were on the scene, Symbian was still the #1 smartphone platform in the world by sales. They were moving over 30 million phones every 3 months. Their strength was hardware. Nokia built tough, reliable phones with amazing cameras and incredible battery life. Symbian was the engine inside them. It was powerful and efficient for its time, built for a world where a smartphone was mostly about calls, texts, and maybe a basic web browser. But under the surface, there was a problem. Symbian was incredibly complicated to develop for. It was a closed-off system that wasn't friendly to outside developers. While Nokia was focused on building the best hardware, they didn't realize the fight was shifting from the device in your hand to the apps you could run on it. They were comfortable, they were the leaders, and they just didn't see the ground shifting beneath their feet. Then there was BlackBerry, or Research in Motion, RIM. Their kingdom was built on a different foundation: security and productivity. For any serious business or government agency, a BlackBerry wasn't just a phone. It was a secure link to your office. The iconic physical keyboard and its legendary BBM messaging service made it an addiction for CrackBerry users. Their focus on the corporate world was their greatest strength and their fatal flaw. The leadership at RIM became so convinced that their enterprise customers would never leave that they completely dismissed the rise of consumer-focused devices. When the iPhone came out, they famously called it a toy. They couldn't imagine a world where what people wanted for fun would become more important than what they needed for work. Both Symbian and BlackBerry were kings of a world that was about to disappear, and their reactions to the new world would seal their fate. Let's start with Nokia. Their end came with shocking speed, and it was almost entirely self-inflicted. In February 2011, Nokia's new CEO, Stephen Elop, a former Microsoft executive, sent out a company-wide memo that became infamous. He called it the Burning Platform Memo. He painted a picture of Nokia as a company standing on a burning oil rig with the flames of Apple and Android closing in. His solution? To jump. He announced that Nokia would be abandoning their own Symbian platform and partnering with Microsoft to use Windows Phone instead. Here's the absolutely crazy part. He made this announcement a full 9 months before they had a single Windows Phone device ready to sell. Think about that. The CEO of the world's largest phone maker just told the public, hey, don't buy our current phones. The platform they run on is a dead man walking. Just wait for our new stuff, which will be here eventually. The result was immediate and catastrophic. People stopped buying Symbian phones. Developers stopped making apps for them. In 2010, before the memo, Nokia was profitable and had nearly 35% of the global smartphone market. 9 months after the memo, their market share had been cut by more than half. It's considered one of the fastest collapses of a market leader in the history of any industry. The burning platform wasn't just a metaphor. The memo itself set the company on fire. BlackBerry's collapse was less a single explosion and more a story of denial leading to a public disaster. After dismissing the iPhone, they realized they needed a touchscreen device of their own. Panicked, they rushed the BlackBerry Storm to market. The Storm was a complete failure. The entire operating system was still designed for a physical keyboard, so navigating it was a nightmare. But the real problem was the screen itself. Instead of a normal touchscreen, it had a weird clickable screen that you had to physically press down like a giant button. It was buggy, slow, and was missing basic features like Wi-Fi when it first launched. It was so bad that carriers reportedly had a nearly 100% return rate. They were replacing almost every single one they sold. The BlackBerry Storm wasn't just a bad phone. It was a public announcement that the company had no idea how to compete in the new world of touchscreens. The toy had eaten their lunch, and they had no answer. While the old kings were falling, new challengers were trying to build a third way to compete with Apple and Google. The two most promising were Microsoft's Windows Phone and Palm's WebOS. Microsoft had every advantage. They had billions of dollars, deep relationships with manufacturers, and a huge base of developers. Their Windows Phone OS actually had a genuinely fresh and innovative design, with its Live Tiles interface. But they were late to the game, and they couldn't solve one critical problem: the app gap. By the time Windows Phone was gaining any traction, the App Store and Google Play each had over 1 million apps. Microsoft's store had a fraction of that. They threw money at the problem, even paying developers to build apps for their platform. But it wasn't enough. The most telling sign of failure came from within Microsoft. Reports from inside the company revealed that Microsoft's own internal teams, like the Office and Skype division, were prioritizing development for iOS and Android over their own Windows Phone. When even your own company doesn't believe in your platform, why would anyone else? Microsoft's final desperate move was to buy Nokia's phone business for over $7 billion. Just over a year later, they wrote off nearly the entire value of that purchase, essentially admitting the whole venture was a colossal financial black hole. But the most tragic story belongs to WebOS. Developed by Palm, a pioneer of the PDA era, WebOS was brilliant. It was years ahead of its time. It introduced features we now take for granted, like card-based multitasking, intuitive gesture navigation, and notifications that actually made sense. The entire user interface was slick, modern, and beautiful. Many of its core ideas were later adopted by both Apple and Android. But Palm was a small company running out of money. In 2010, the tech giant HP bought them for $1.2 billion, mostly to get their hands on WebOS. It seemed like the perfect match: brilliant software backed by a hardware giant. HP launched a tablet called the Touchpad running WebOS. It was priced to compete with the iPad, but it didn't have the apps or the marketing to succeed right away. Then, just 49 days after the Touchpad launched, HP's new CEO abruptly killed the entire WebOS hardware division. 49 days. The executive who had pushed for the acquisition was out recovering from surgery when the decision was made. He later said the leadership that killed WebOS was suffering from tunnel vision under pressure. They saw poor initial sales and just pulled the plug without giving one of the most innovative mobile platforms ever created a real chance to find its footing. It wasn't a market failure, it was a corporate execution. There's one more interesting failure worth mentioning: Firefox OS. Mozilla, the creators of the Firefox browser, had a noble idea. They wanted to build a mobile OS based entirely on open web technologies like HTML5. Their goal was to bring smartphones to developing countries on ultra-cheap hardware, some phones costing as little as $20. It was a great mission, but it ran into a hard technical reality. The web-based software was just too heavy and inefficient for the cheap, underpowered hardware it was designed for. Users reported that the phones were painfully slow. Taps on the screen could take seconds to register. Trying to do something as simple as browse a web page while listening to music could crash the system. The paradox was that the OS designed for the lowest-end phones needed more power than they had. Firefox OS was an idea that was philosophically beautiful, but practically unusable. So, did all this innovation just vanish? Not entirely. Some of these failed ideas have found a surprising second life. WebOS, the platform HP killed in 49 days, was sold to LG. Today, it's the operating system that powers LG's popular smart TVs. In that environment where you don't need a million apps, its clean interface and simple multitasking have found a perfect home. And the dream of Firefox OS didn't completely die either. Its code was used to create a new system called KaiOS. By focusing specifically on smart feature phones, devices with a keypad, but with access to modern apps, it found success where Firefox OS failed. With backing from Google, KaiOS became a huge player in markets like India, proving the original mission was possible with the right approach. When we look back at this graveyard of mobile OSs, it's easy to say they just failed to innovate. But the real story is more complex. Nokia didn't fail to innovate, it was the market leader right before its CEO publicly destroyed confidence in its own products. BlackBerry didn't fail because its keyboards were bad, it failed because its leadership was too arrogant to see the world was changing. Windows Phone didn't fail because it was a bad OS, it failed because it couldn't overcome the network effect of the app stores, a problem even Microsoft's money couldn't solve. And WebOS really didn't fail at all, it was just bought by the wrong company at the wrong time. The hard lesson from these stories is that in tech, it's not always the best technology that wins. Timing, hubris, business strategy, and the power of an ecosystem can be far more important. These companies weren't just competing with a product, they were competing with the entire ecosystems of Apple and Google. Once those two giants had established their app stores and developer communities, it created a gravitational pull that was almost impossible for anyone else to escape. So the next time you pick up your phone, just remember the ghosts of the platforms that could have been, and the brutal decisions that left us in a world with only two real choices.